So here we are at my second of my parenting and parent and family well-being webinar series. And we're going to be talking about behaviors today. I think that's something that a lot of parents, that would be like the first thing that comes to parents' minds, probably, like how, the stress of parent dealing with their child's behaviors. But I'm just going to review what we talked about last week. So last week, we kind of talked about stress for the parent. So imagine that there's like chronic stressors and then there's acute stressors. So the thing is, if you have a chronic stress, that means like if you had no chronic stress, this might be like your starting point, your baseline, when you're calm and not having stress. But if you have chronic, you kind of stay here all the time. So you already have quite a bit that you're used to and you don't realize it. And then where's your capacity? So we talked about the idea of capacity. It's like when you get to a point where you can't handle anymore, this is where your capacity would be. And so you don't have as much room for the acute stressors that might be coming. And the truth is, on any given day, it would be really good for you to check in with yourself and see how close you are to capacity. Because that's, that you get to a point where you perhaps cannot be functional and get certain things done that really have to happen. So we should be protective of how much stress we take in a day. And then the other concept we talked about is I don't like the term stress management because that sounds like you have to have it and you have to deal with it. The better way to look at stress is to try to be stress resilient or look at your stress and say, what of this list do I not have to deal with? What's just good enough and what can I not do today? And it's more like a way of thinking about self-care in terms of being aware of your stress. So there's that. And then today, when I was planning for this, it's kind of like thinking about, and for planning for last week, is like, well, parents who have kids that are much older versus very little, the 2 and 3 year olds, and then there's like the teenagers. You would think they have nothing in common. I mean, it's hard. For me to be offering a webinar, I'm trying to figure out how to frame some of the things that I think parents deal with. And we have someone coming in. This is a person named iPhone. Who are you, iPhone?
Hi, it's Nicole.
Hi, Nicole.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad you can make it.
Yes.
We are kind of just getting started. I was just reviewing what we talked about last week.
Okay, great. I'm gonna just mute because my kids are still awake.
That's okay. And I'm assuming you didn't get a chance to listen to the recording.
I did not, but I will watch it after this.
Okay. Well, we did last week we talked about the parent stress level and a way to think about rather than managing stress, having a minute to minute awareness of where you're at with your stress. And that the idea is that when we get to a point when we're at capacity, and we can't handle anything else. Okay. So that's pretty much what we talked about.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. So, what I think would be very helpful as I was planning this is the idea of, so tonight we're going to be talking about behaviors. And, it's interesting to think about behaviors for a teenager, behaviors for a 3 year old, behaviors for uh, an older offspring. I don't want to use the term child. But I do think there's some themes that still hold true, and it doesn't matter. They show up differently, but the causes for behaviors are often similar, but then they show up differently in different ages. So the idea is, what about your child's capacity? When we think about how we function, when we are at capacity, well, we're basically not functional anymore. I mean, we are in trouble if we reach our capacity and we can't handle any more stress and we still have to make dinner and we still have to put the kids to bed. And maybe we even have to run out and pick up something at someone's house or like whatever it is that we have to do that didn't get done. That's where we end up in trouble because we don't have energy left. We don't have anything left. And it starts to take a hit on our physical health. And every time when we're living with that kind of stress, we're losing life force energy or chi, or however you want to look at it. The stuff that's supposed to run our body, um, there for healing, there for allowing us to release emotions and kind of be in the flow of life and be joyous. That's where like well-being comes in. It's very different than talking about health when we're talking about well-being. Um, so some of the things that I came up with in terms of categories, trying to think the best way to share this with you. Hmm. Give me a half a second. Okay, that's not going to work. Sorry. I thought I had it open on my computer already. Okay, so I think what I might do is screen share with you because you can look at this. Can people see this? I can make this a little bigger. So I know sometimes that's necessary. Is that good?
I'm not seeing anything on my part. Is anybody else?
Um, well, you're on the phone. I don't know like what you need to do on a Zoom, but I'll read it to you. Is that good?
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you.
Okay. So I was just thinking, like, how do you categorize some of this? I really want parents to start to understand what their child experiences might be. Actually, before we go through the handout, so I had kids that had sensory issues growing up and learning challenges. And for a while, I ran a support group for other parents. And a lot of the theme for some kids is how hard is their life? How difficult is it for them to do the thing or the multiple things that another child of the same age can easily do? So we think in terms of age appropriate, right? But some kids have challenges with learning or challenges with sensory stuff or challenges with frustration tolerance. I think that's a really big one. And could be some emotional stuff going on. And in any given top moment as parents, we are thinking about what we need to get our kids to do. So it's kind of, there's a couple of different layers to this, but like we see our role as fix, guide, correct. But in fact, what if we have like an agenda for what needs to happen and they don't have any capacity to do it? Maybe they're used up from something else that's going on in their life. They lost the battery is dead. They just don't have the ability to tolerate the demands that we are making of them, even if they seem reasonable demands, right? They might be on one day, they might be reasonable, another day they might not be. And that might even include getting along with siblings or sharing your toys on a play date. Because for a kid that might have has other stuff going on, they just have less ability on one day versus another in order to perform and or to behave or to be their best version of themselves. So these are categories. It's processing issues and cognitive overload. So, like, let's say you're 3, or yeah, I'd say, what if you're like 1.5, 2, 3, 4 years old, and you have limited vocabulary and you don't fully understand what's being asked of you? And or you don't have the ability to like say that because it's probably your whole world is like that, right? So those are kind of, or you have learning challenges, right? Emotional and mood regulation, like if you have something that went on in your day, that might be it. Like you might be at max, right? Then there's like feeling misunderstood, someone not understanding like what your life is like or what you've been through that day, and not necessarily having the ability to communicate that. And also, when you think about it, communicating that takes more energy, right? So like we're less likely to like be able to find the words for things when we're stressed. Um, all of us probably could relate to with being physical or not having the extra energy to put out, or just being tired. So physically exhausted. Um, not being able to ask for help. So like, all right, so communication and language gaps. I can send this out to you guys when I send the recording too, if you like. But communication and language gaps, like you're just not able to say what's wrong, ask for help, and naming your feelings. Um, if you're a teenager, trouble fitting in or dealing with some kind of rejection earlier in the day, like we might not know what happened that has created the behavior that we're dealing with at home. And then feeling like you've disappointed your parent, or you can tell that they're mad at you, and not having a way to actually, like, it gets to a point where if it's a repeat, it ends up where they feel like they're a disappointment, right? Um, and then, some kids attachment and relationship. Some kids need more calming support because their nervous system can't do it. So they might need us to help with them to regulate our nervous system. And then often because of our own capacity, our tone when we're dealing with our kids might be enough to push them over the edge. And the interesting thing about it is when you think of like the stress of a parent and then the stress of a child, I feel like sometimes for parents, there's a lot of fear if they can't figure out how to get their kid to behave, right? So that's coming across energetically and in how we sound. And if we're stressed, we might not be picking the best words that land with them in a way that makes them feel neutral or willing, right? Or keepable. And so the thing is that there's certain kinds of behaviors that are like part of normal growing up. I don't know why there's a lot of this. Like I feel like it's everything that I'm talking about feels like it's on a scale. So I'm going to try to do this without my hands up here. But yeah. So the thing is, part of growing up is kids will experiment. Kids will want independence at a certain age, but then they also still need you, and then they're angry about it, right? Because it's confusing. Um, Even little kids might want independence, but then they really can't do it. And then if you're stressed, they're going to make a mess. And so it really is an interesting play between parent stress and kid stress. So then I think that I'd say in the last 10 years or even 5 years, so many of us have nervous system dysregulation. I don't think we have enough stuff built into our lives that help us to handle. So, again, I don't like the term handling stress, but I had an experience recently. I felt exhausted and I felt like I was at capacity. And I went out in the garden for an hour. And after that, I felt amazing. So I feel like we all need self-care to be something that is built into our lives as a way to counter all the demands. Not where we wait until we're exhausted and we book a once a week massage or a therapist appointment. I feel like taking care of ourselves should be having community, having a social life, having someone to talk to, being able to laugh, having support, people to help with the work that you're doing, help with your raising your family, take your kids for a night. Like all of these different things would make the work that we're doing raising our kids feel more bearable or give more ease to our lives. And so I do think that that ends up being a factor in how we handle our kids' behavior when they're struggling, because we don't we don't have the flexibility to figure out what their needs are. So I guess a lot of what I'm talking about now is like, what is their unmet needs, and do we have the ability to be the investigator, to hear what's going on and notice or think about what we know about what happened in their day. So what this is actually all from ChatGPT, actually, and a long conversation with it. But so the mismatch happens when we're holding someone accountable, but they're dysregulated. So if you're dysregulated, you're not at your best, you maybe can't perform, and you can't make someone else happy, even if it's a reasonable expectation for what we call good behavior. And that's similar, like when we think about maturity, you should know better at a certain age. You can expect more from your older child. You know what? On their bad day, that's not true. Right? So it's kind of like, I guess we should all, as parents, be open to maybe it's not that person's not having a good day. Maybe they need more alone time, not as punishment, but as regrouping. And so that's kind of like offering support instead of giving them consequences for behavior. And really knowing your kid, right? Like having a read. But you can't do that if you don't take care of your own needs. So, did you guys want to talk a little bit about that, or should we dive into a meditation about this topic?
I just think it's good that it's related to, sometimes you have to count, say, okay, step back. What's truly in front of us here? At that moment in time.
Yeah, but you only can really do that well if you've taken care of yourself.
Exactly.
You know, and it's like self-care. I have strong opinions about self-care, but self-care ought to be minute by minute.
Has to be
Right.
something.
So especially when you're not used to it, to really train yourself to check in with yourself.
Mhm.
So we're going to do a little meditation. And actually, if you could excuse me for a half a second, I will be right back, okay? You know what is kind of funny? So what's funny is I'm never going to be the formal person that's going to have a perfect webinar. And so I probably have to do some editing, but I have a headache. So I'm taking ibuprofen, which I never take, but that's where I went. So thanks for your patience.
Yeah, okay.
I'll have to edit this out. Oh, good. I get to learn how to edit. All right. So there you go. That's for me is to see where I can start it again. Okay, so we're going to do a little meditation, and the meditation is hope. This is my hope that it will help you to understand some of your kids' behavior in a completely different way. In terms of if on a given day, what's going on with them. So similar to what I was just talking about. So find yourself a comfortable position. Okay, take a breath. Let your shoulders soften. Let your face soften. Let go of the tension. And let your heart soften. Even if just a little. Imagine a time when you were at your limit because life had been too much for too long. You were tired, worn out, carrying things that no one could see. Maybe you were even grieving. Maybe you were anxious and trying to hold it together. Maybe things had been building for days or weeks. Then someone asked something of you, something small, but it wasn't possible. Inside you thought, I just can't. But maybe you didn't actually have the words to say that, or you knew you wouldn't have been understood. Take a breath. What if your child is having moments just like that? What if the bad behavior is just a sign that they're done and they don't know how to say so? What if they're trying, really trying, but their brain or their body or their heart just can't manage it in that moment? What if the truth is that they are so full with emotions that they can't be cooperative, can't get along with others, share their toys, or control their anger? What if they were hurt or disappointed by something that happened earlier in the day with one of their peers, a teacher, or even a sibling? What if more often than not, what they need isn't more discipline or consequences, but more softness? Someone to help them know it is safe to share what they are feeling. What if the tone, the pace, the energy of the room could help them feel safe enough to trust? And what if they're not being difficult? They're just done, overwhelmed, stuck, incapacitated, and trying to figure out how to come back to themselves? What if the truth underneath their behavior is sounding a little bit more like, I'm not okay and I want to cry? I don't know how to ask for what I need. I don't want to feel rejected. I feel like I'm failing, and I don't mean to be bad, and I can't do better in this moment. Or I want your closeness, but I'm scared because you seem mad. I'm not trying to push you away. I just don't know how to let you in. And I want to be independent, but I need to feel small and be held. Sometimes it isn't about getting them to do the thing you told them to do. Sometimes they just can't. And sometimes what looks like defiance might be a cry for help, might be grief, exhaustion, confusion, or fear. Maybe a moment when they don't need fixing. They just need someone who sees them and stays with them, and they can feel safe even when they don't seem to be behaving. Take another breath and let yourself feel what feels true for you. How was that for you?
I mean, going back, it was a little hard. You know, Sarah.
I think it always applies though.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could change it the other way too. I mean, we have those moments and we want to be understood also when we're having them. It's just the way it is to be human.
Right.
So we've lost Nicole, I think. Let's see if she said something in the chat. Oh no, that's Vicky's chat, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Um, so I was going to do some energy work around relationships with children. Does that sound like a plan?
Sure.
Okay. Give me a second.
Need a cup. Need a cup. Need a cup.
Okay. So one of the things that I think is definitely true is when we have friction, stress between two people, friction between two people. Oh wait, she's coming back. Okay, so
Sorry, my phone died.
okay, I'm glad you made your way back.
Thanks.
So I just want actually before we go into an energy session, I want to say that one of the things that have always been on my mind is when we talk about behavior, all of what I talked about in the meditation and before, I think is true. I think that's true for even like not parents, just two adults, right? A couple. It's not usually true for friends. I think they kind of, I don't know, they understand each other differently. But like when you're living together with someone, right? Like you have bad days, and then you're not your best self, right? But one of the things I do want to say is I know from raising my own kids that some parts of it they can't help. Like I guess in some ways, all that I talked about, that might be more true for the kid that has like a specific developmental disorder or challenge because they have a lot more they're dealing with. But I also know there's parts of neurology that actually affect behavior in other ways. So I was doing a little research on that too, but like this is more of um, a general dive into behavior, right? But I do know that there's other aspects where the kid just really can't, really more predisposed to certain behavioral issues. But also these other things still apply, and I think it just adds on to what they're already dealing with. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So what I was going to say is whenever we have a relationship and there's been friction or um, a history between two people, we end up with a short fuse. We could be the parents. It could be not even a parent-child relationship, right? I think of a couple that wants to try again, but they can't forgive, right? Or it's just you're just affected by the lack of safety in that relationship. The maybe both parties have a lot of emotional energy that has built up over time. So what I'd like to do is an energy session working on for each of you the energy between you and your children. So I know Nicole, you've not done an energy thing with me before. I'm going to send energy. And what I ask of people is that your palms be upward, but of course comfortably on your laps. And you might feel tingling or heat or maybe weight on your hands, on your palms. And I'm going to send energy for about 5 minutes. So I also want to say that, probably, no, I wish I'd said that before, but what we're looking for is calm energy. It kind of feels like a little rhythmic movement. And then no, it's not like, let's say if one person is on one hand, the energy in one hand and the other person, the energy in the other hand, it should feel not like one is pushing the other away. It should feel almost like a pulse between them and very equal would be like a good, that's what I'm aiming for in terms of like, um, and then sometimes there's like a lot of pressure, which is probably like the emotional energy between two people, or the stress energy. So that's what I'm working on now. How's everyone feeling?
Tired even after a nap today. Just kind of a different tired, more calm tired. I think.
Yeah.
I'm having a little trouble hearing you, Vicky. I don't know why.
Like a calm tired, calm, relaxed.
So, would anyone else like to share like what they're feeling?
The same. Tired. Calm.
So, I feel like it would be interesting, like if whatever friction might have been normally there is less, it's almost like getting the relationship to a neutral energy, right? So, like our experiences that we have affect our energy field, and they're held, then they're stuck. When the energy's not moving and flowing, there's emotions of that. Emotions actually are energy, but there'll be stuck emotions. It's like, the memories, the frustrations, and it accumulates.
I feel less tension around the heart actually.
So, yeah, so I feel like if we want to work on relationship, how cool is it that we can dump all that?
Very cool.
It's kind of like a fresh start.
Nice.
And I yawn a lot because when I'm moving energy, it's coming into me and I release it. But it is a weird thing in a meeting to be yawning. So please pardon the yawning. So I do not have a very clear, I have a little bit of an idea as to what I'm doing for part 3 and part 4, but I would love to hear suggestions. I was thinking about the idea of how there's a term, there's a lot of terms now that has to do with nervous system regulation. One of them is resourced. The idea is if we can figure out what we need to do for ourselves, like when I was talking about when I went out and played the garden and I came back in and I felt amazing. I was exhausted. I felt like I couldn't, handle anymore. I went out in the garden for an hour, came back, and I felt amazing. So it's like if we have certain things built into our life, if we know when if we pay attention to our stress level, and then we know what we need to balance the demands or the stress in our life, that's being resourced. So there's some work I have on that. I really think that we should all in humanity learn about deep self-care of checking in with ourselves. But we could talk a little bit about that or other specific parenting issues if people wanted to share and we can just brainstorm for suggestions. I'm really good for like finding the way to figure out, like, I'm just really good at creating solutions, I feel. I'm a good brainstormer. But for parents, understanding children, understanding why they behave a certain way, if a story is shared with me. And obviously, I don't have the facts, so I'm kind of speculating when I do that. But if you guys had ideas about what you might like me to talk about in part 3 or 4, otherwise I will put together something probably from what I just mentioned. But let me know, or let me know now if you think there's something.
Mm.
Sleep on it.
Yeah. I did like the fact last week, instead of, because we always try to mother, did you do this? Did you do that? And because that's our focus, right? And you mentioned it today, but also, saying, is there anything you need from me? It's a whole new concept. I mean, it's, it seems silly, like it shouldn't be, but it's a practice.
You
And
know
I
what
think,
would be helpful? Because I don't know if you say the ages of your children.
oh,
I mean, all of you, right? So it would be helpful to people to understand.
21 to 25, but I still, and it's out of my fear of of loss. I've had a lot of loss. So I don't, if you don't take your vitamins, you're gonna, you don't take your greens because I know you're not eating right. it bothers me. It makes me worry. So then I look like this, right? And that's what, as mothers, because that's what we want. We want things to be perfect. Well, at least in my trauma.
Well, I
So,
mean, we don't want to be afraid, really.
yeah,
It-
okay. Yeah, I don't
That
feel
that
yeah.
being not afraid is more perfect, really.
Right, right. So,
Yeah.
so just but knowing that, okay, you've done like Angel always said, you have them till you're 18, and then they have to start doing their own decisions, and you've seeded them. But letting no saying, do you need anything from me surrounding this? Maybe I could help you or whatever. It was a practice because that's not normally how I do it.
So you just started that since last week.
And he actually answers me, no, I'm good. I'm all right. Okay. I'm here.
Yeah. I'm having to learn something similar with my adult children. They're not going to do what I ask of them because I want them to. They might, depending on what it is, because they get it. They they want me to feel good, but if I'm asking them to do something that they are not on the same page, I just have to put the seed out there and hope that they think about it, right? Just just initiate a conversation without it sounding like I'm telling them what to do, right?
Or say this is where I'm coming from, just so I can, you understand.
Right. And Patrice, how old are your girls?
18 and 22.
So can you relate to what Vicky's talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. So it's interesting because when they're older, it's funny because here's the thing. We have issues with our inner child, right? We all have now and then. Their inner child is not so inner. They have not learned how to bury, hopefully, we don't want them to, but it's like they're not burying their emotion. They don't know how to hide it. They don't know why they would have to. And so they're a little bit more reactive. Um, they're gonna react to us, right?
For sure.
So the thing is, when they're a certain age, they want to be independent, but then there are other days that they want to be taken care of. So it's a very interesting thing. So Nicole, how old are yours? I know you have three.
11, 5, and almost 3.
Yeah, so your life is a more like what we all had back in the day.
Yes, for sure. I'm sure you guys miss it.
Yes,
I do.
Reminding
I do.
myself one day I'm going to miss them being little.
Oh, you will. You
Yeah.
definitely will.
But you know what? It's funny, there was a point when I go, it's not like I'm not going to be in a relationship with this person. It's just going to change and it's going to be a different relationship and it's just a new chapter. It's not like anything's over. It's just a different version of it.
Yes, absolutely.
But I feel, when they were younger, you had, I don't want to say control, but you knew they were safe. Now that they're older, that safety isn't really there. And that, you always worry, I think, as a mom.
Yeah, that's a whole nother worry for sure. I see with my 11-year-old, he's like starting to become independent. And yeah, it's almost a bigger worry.
Yeah.
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 But anyway, here's the thing. It dawned on me at one point. I'm like, I actually never did have control. I remember when my first child was little, I was thinking I was very controlling because I didn't have like tools, right? And then at one point I go, I don't really have control. She's got her own brain, her own body. And then I had my kid, and I'm like, okay, the best I'm going to have is influence. And so that's all about the relationship. That's all about how we can try to be present, listen, give them choices. Some of the time, spend time with them without trying to fix them. Because it's just nice to enjoy their company sometimes. And they feel that. They
Yeah.
they need that. So, but it is interesting. It's like, oh wait, there's never control. There never was, you know. Just when they're little, you kind of have all the you kind of have they can't do anything without you, right? Like you're taller than them. You can, yeah.
So
Anyway,
even now, like if my daughter tells me like a problem or just something that happened, and I try to give her a solution, and she's like, I'm not asking you for a solution. I'm just talking to you, just telling you what happened, or just
yeah,
her situation, just sharing it with me. But I'm still in that mindset of, okay, well, how can I help correct this? How can this be fixed when
right. I
she's not
know.
looking for it to be fixed?
So here's the thing. Well, we all know that. As they get older, they're going to have things that are not fixable because they have to play themselves out, or it's just not. It's a circumstance that's not didn't go well for them. But you know what's great? If when you're there after they tell you something, say, "Did you want advice, or would you be open to advice, or did, or even before they tell you, say, did you need someone to just listen, or do you have something you'd like advice?" Because it really helps us to know. And then the truth is, you did help them. If you can listen to them. So here's what I think is happening. When we're stressed, upset, it's a stuck energy. If someone listens to us or validates or is even there with us during a trauma, the energy is stored. It's not stuck in us. Telling another person helps to get it out, and having that person showing empathy to us helps us to release it as well.
Mm.
And that's what they need when they're older. They actually need that when they're little too, but it shows up a little differently.
Yeah. My
And it
son,
is amazing when you do that, you haven't done much but actually listen, right?
Right.
So,
my son came in last night and I just listened and I had a few questions and it was like 30 minutes. It was like so enjoyable. I was yawning half the time because it was really late, but it was really nice.
it is awesome. And I'm just gonna share another really quick story. Sometimes I'm up late and sometimes I go to bed earlier. So sometimes it might be closer to 11. So my son, two of my adult sons live here actually. So when he comes home, if I'm up, we'll sit and talk, right? Like you were saying, Vicky. So the other day, he came home pretty early because he wasn't having a good time, and he goes, "When you're not awake when I come home, I'm really disappointed." I
Aw.
was just like, "Wow,
Oh,
wow that you feel that way, and wow that you said it, or wow that you even realized it, right?" It's just so it felt like so special. The whole next day, actually,
Wow. That is really nice.
you know. I'm sure he wasn't broken up over it if his mom's in bed, but anyway, I really appreciate you three coming to my part two of my webinar series. I have to get better at outreach and putting videos out there, telling people about cool stuff I'm doing, but this is okay. I will get there. So. Anyway, I'll send the recording and I'll send the list of categories for what might be going on with our kids that would create such that they're just not in a good place on a given day.
my son just was all dressed up and walked out on his date. So
Wow.
Aw.
kind of nice because I love the girl. And he's happy. So.
That's
That makes
good.
you happy. You're only as happy as your happiest child, right?
Oh, and I would say that maybe I think we can work on maybe there are different kinds of happiness.
It sounds negative, but like if your child's down, you tend to carry that. If they're happy, you're happy too.
And especially if they live in your house, I think that makes it trickier. If it's out of sight, out of mind, it's a little easier to enjoy something and feel happy, I think.
There's still some, but yeah.
I don't know.
Anyway, on that note.
So, have a good night, everyone.
You
And
too.
if something comes to you that you want to share, I wouldn't mind some testimonials, or if you notice that some of the things we talk about have made a difference for you, I think that would be great. If you wanted to like share that or write it up for me and send it, or even text me.
Okay.
Okay.
It's not something you would necessarily know now, but so take care.
All
You
right.
too. Good
All right.
night, everybody.
Bye.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Good night. Thanks for coming. Bye.
Bye.